The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Theo Goodman from Transmission.rocks,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Will Pangman from Satoshi Social,
And now Airbits. Hello.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1. Who owns and runs CoinTelegraph? CoinTelegraph, who some would label the second most popular Bitcoin news site, just behind the venerable CoinDesk, came under fire this week with a Reddit post saying they were shutting down. A Zapchain question asking who owns them, and a MadBitcoins exclusive interview with former Cointelegraph contributor Ian DeMartino, where he claimed that Cointelegraph was often paid to promote Bitcoin companies and may have even been owned or operated to promote Bitcoin and other early crypto note coins. Theo Goodman, your thoughts on these shocking revelations?
Unfortunately, in our space, I'm not sure how shocking they are, but I think the extent to the story is a little bit surprising. The main point with your interview is that there was a CEO that wasn't really the CEO. I think that's pretty surprising because I think a lot of people thought that that person was the real CEO. A lot of it sounds kind of like a TV show or a movie. Some of the things like, there's this guy here and nobody knows who's the boss, and sometimes we get paid this much and sometimes we get paid that much. Unfortunately, I'm not totally shocked. I think that if you do, it's okay to promote companies on your website as long as you somehow mark it as a promotional article or mark it as some form of advertising. That's just fine. But when you don't do that, then that's definitely questionable, you could say. And these are things that have come out, but I'm not shocked.
Will Pangman.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us have been hearing rumors about Cointelegraph for many months now. I've been friends with a few of their writers who have, written exclusively there and then decided to kind of broaden their horizons and then leave altogether many months ago even. And of course, yeah, like your interview with Ian kind of elucidated, and like Theo just pointed out, there's this person calling themselves CEO who doesn't have decision-making power, isn't really a CEO, and these writers, friends of mine, I'm asking, like, so there's a CEO, what's going on, what's wrong, and they're like, well, she's not the CEO or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make heads or tails of that, but it's always seemed very suspicious and just kind of goofy, like a TV show, like Theo points out. So, I mean, this is kind of, we're seeing this a lot. There are people behind things in Bitcoin who want to remain anonymous. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's great products that do that, and have public representatives. Like, for example, Dima Mershik, popularly known as Rasa, he's the public face of the Mycelium wallet. And, it's not really a secret who's behind Mycelium, but it's really not public at all. And this is kind of a thing, and that's totally okay. But when you get into, any kind of improprieties, and of course all of these Bitcoin publications, and not just Bitcoin publications, but others, they definitely take bribes for getting, from companies outlet to push your press release. Of course, there's above board relationships like that, and there should be disclosures, of course. But yeah, I don't remember seeing much of that from Cointelegraph, and they were always getting criticized. I didn't have too much of a problem with the reporting there, but I continually saw people on Reddit complaining about factual errors and just various inaccuracies, and even people claiming that there's like amateurish behavior going on there. And I don't know for sure. I don't know anything about any of that, but yeah, it's very weird. But again, we've seen these kinds of failures or just evaporations of businesses in Bitcoin before. So.
And it is worth noting, Will, that it's okay to be an anonymous producer of a Bitcoin wallet or anonymous producer of some software, but it's really virtually unheard of to be an anonymous news or news agency. Usually you know who owns the New York Times, for example, you know who owns the Sacramento Bee. All of these media companies are very public, and you can look them up, and that has to do with trust. When you're trusting a news organization, it does make it easier if you know who owns it, if you know that they have some biases already, like Mort Zuckerman owns the U.S. News and World Report. We can assume Mort has biases. He's a liberal. Those go to his newspaper. Roger Ailes owns Fox News. He's a conservative. He has conservative biases. This is what the ownership, knowing the ownership lets us know. And we did have some follow-up stories that were from our Bitcoin. Let's see. Oh, this is the wrong kind of screen share. Let me try this one more time. If
Thomas, while you're bringing that up, I just want to point out, it's kind of a meme lately, but there's 4 to 6, I think it's even down to like 5 or 4 major multinational corporations that own all media basically in at least the U.S., right? This is kind of a meme lately, and that's kind of like secret sort of control. Most people think that there's impartiality in some of the sources, but really a left biased source and a right biased source could be owned by the same parent company, General Electric and Viacom and Clear Channel, and the list goes on, right? So there is some kind of we're just now becoming familiar. I think Bitcoin's transparency brings this all to the surface. The internet as well. Like the word gets out. There's only 5 multinationals that own all the media, not hundreds of companies. So
that is true, Will. There are only about 5 multinationals that own the media. I just think with Bitcoin we could do better, and especially the kind of people that we have in Bitcoin, they're more interested in decentralization. They're more interested in ownership. So here's a bit of what we learned from our Bitcoin. David Bailey from BTC Media, who also runs Bitcoin Magazine, says that it's not a conspiracy. He says that CoinTelegraph is owned by a Russian man named Dima, and that he met him at a Bitcoin supper club, and he was a nice guy. Jackson Palmer from Dogecoin also chipped in, saying that it was majority owned by this guy, and it linked to a LinkedIn profile that was previously owned by a Russian man named Dima, who may or may not have deleted his profile. We also had an interesting piece of evidence sent to us via email. This is an altcoin promotion campaign step-by-step guide, presumably from CT. It says CT instead of CoinTelegraph, but we'll assume that's the same. And it explains how you sign a contract paid in your coin. CoinTelegraph integrates your coin with one of its partners' casino platforms. CoinTelegraph makes use of its social channels to promote the campaign. Note the heart. That means love. Users purchase a minimum of $10 worth of your coin on any exchange and make a post on social media linking to your site. Users then create an account at the casino or top up their existing accounts with a minimum of $10 in the relevant coin. Users begin to play at the casino. The user can cash out his coin if it increases by 10 times in the first month. If the user is unsuccessful and loses all of his coins at the casino, and as a result receives a refund of lost coins, but to his wallet no more than $100. So this is a pretty interesting campaign. Looks to be from CoinTelegraph, but we can't be for sure on this. It just say CT. But it is interesting to think about the kind of pay-for-play type operations we have here, where a company wants to promote their product, and maybe they have a great product, maybe they don't really need to promote it in this way, but it's really hard when you're a company. I understand they'd probably want to pay, and it seems like a group like this may be offering them the chance to do so. We did have a follow-up interview this morning with Evander Smart, who currently works at CoinTelegraph, and he said that everything seems to be fine now. As a writer, he's been paid regularly and what he was agreed to be paid, and he's had no editorial control imposed on his articles. So the new CoinTelegraph may be completely different than the old CoinTelegraph, but as we continue to get these reports, we're going to continue to bring you to them, and you can make up your own mind. You decide. We're trying to give you both sides of this issue, and if the owner wants to maintain his anonymity and be invisible, that's his option, but we're going to continue to report on whatever anybody sends us. Exit question. Who's more at fault? The companies who pay for fake stories or the journalists who print them without attribution? Theo Goodman.
I think that it's hard to say who's more to blame, but I think that we need to remember journalists that are willing to do that are, or also journalists that are willing to write for really cheap are partly to blame for this whole thing. So all you content providers out there, don't let yourself get paid cheap.
Will Pangman.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand the question. I think who's at fault is whoever allowed their business to. I'm going to assign. I like to assign it as close to the root as possible.
All right, Will, your audio seems to be breaking up. You might want to try turning off your video. That might increase your bandwidth level. But we're going to go ahead and move on to issue 2. Issue 2, T0. Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne continues to be the world's second greatest revolutionary, right behind Satoshi Nakamoto himself, launching a partnership this week with the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the ICBC, the world's largest bank, as well as 5 other banks, to create what was formerly called Medici and now is called T0. T0 plans to offer public and private equities as well as the ability to short, all with blockchain-based technology. Byrne himself, during the live stream, claimed that the technology would be ledger independent and did not name a technology partner, leaving Bitcoin, Ethereum, and counterparty fans wildly speculating. Will Pangman, your thoughts on Byrne's amazing new stock market machine?
How am I sounding? Is this all right? Am I good?
Sounds all right.
Great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this effort. I'm a big fan of Patrick Byrne's vision and his mind, his foresight. A lot of people, I've been mentioning on this show quite a bit over the last almost 2 years that, this is a guy who had foresight, the likes of which we haven't maybe seen since Satoshi Nakamoto, or you of all of the Wall Street corruption and naked short selling and all this stuff, in the early 2000s. So his research really, he was the most hated man on Wall Street for those reasons. And then Bitcoin comes around and he sees right away the answer to his problem. So good on Patrick Byrne.
We seem to be losing you, Will. You're starting to speak in computer language. Theo Goodman.
It's really a great innovation. I really like what he's doing. And I think that's kind of what Will was alluding to, that he's years ahead. So he had the foresight to already be working on this for over a year, and I think that really shows a lot. And right now you see a lot of banks saying, "Oh yeah, blockchain, that's kind of cool. We need to do it." And oh yeah, we are working on blockchain. But he was already building this marketplace long before all of these other banks and institutions were even considering using blockchain technology to do it. I also think it's really interesting that they're explicitly saying we're offering shorting. So that's really good, because you need to be able to go long, you need to be able to go short, you need to be able to do all the things you would normally be able to do, and now you can do it in a quote honest way. So that's going to do away with naked short selling, presumably, and a lot of other things that are basically forms of fraud and trickery. And I think that's really good. So now we can have a real conversation. So this market is going to be an honest conversation, because every market is basically a conversation, and now we can have a real conversation.
Will, go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully this is a little bit better, but I just want to direct people to deepcapture.com. This is Patrick Byrne's early project in the early 2000s that was uncovering all of the Wall Street improprieties, naked short selling. He saw this coming way down the road. When Bitcoin arrived on his doorstep, he realized the removal of the middleman and how powerful that was with Bitcoin, and applying that to the Wall Street stock settlement process, which is incredibly convoluted. He does a great job presenting that in this announcement video. So go to YouTube, go find that video, and then realize how prescient this man is on deepcapture.com.
All right, and that website again was deepcapture.com. Exit question. If Patrick Byrne was John Galt and asked you to go away with him to a secluded mountain range in Colorado to work on projects to make the world a better place, would you go? Theo Goodman.
Sure, why not? Sounds like fun. I mean, I want to know a little bit more about the conditions of going to this secluded place in the mountains. But yeah, I would say yes.
You get to share a tent with Patrick Byrne himself. Will Pangman.
100%. Yes.
The answer is maybe, but Colorado does sound nice. Full legalization. Sounds very nice. Oh, we should have a right page for the right page. Let's try this. Check out the brand new purse.io, where you can save 20% just for spending Bitcoins. How do you support Bitcoin? I spend it. What do you think money is for? Spending. Spend your Bitcoins today at purse.io. Issue 3. Bitcoin can't be owned, says Japanese court. Japanese courts made some major mistakes today as they misunderstood, thinking that something cannot be owned simply because it is virtual or requires third parties to hold it to make its existence verifiable. Bitcoin is real. It can be owned, and Japan is going to have to change their laws because otherwise Karpeles goes free. Mark Karpeles, CEO of Mt. Gox, lover of cats, accused operator of a willy bots that drove the price up, currently sits in a jail cell in Japan awaiting trial. Will Pangman, are the Japanese courts correct? And if Bitcoin can't be owned, should Mark Karpeles be set free?
This is a tough one because, you know, in my deep dive of Bitcoin, I started to realize that it really shakes the foundation of lots of constructs in society. And I think one of those constructs is potentially the notion of property itself, or how property relates to corporate personhood. So I'm going to say maybe that they're right, but I don't think they're right for the right reasons. You know, it's probably legal mumbo jumbo, and the regulations all tied up that are confusing for, you know, these people. They clearly don't have the understanding that they require to prosecute this case, apparently, and you know, hopefully justice is served on Karpeles. You know.
Theo Goodman.
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin can be owned, and they're going to have to figure out what's going on and just take another look at it.
Exit question. Putting this non-Bitcoin ownership nonsense aside, the Karpeles verdict. Force prediction. Guilty or not guilty? Will Pangman.
Well, Japan has a notoriously, egregiously high conviction rate, so I'm going to say guilty.
Theo Goodman.
Guilty.
The answer is guilty. Moving on to issue 3. Issue 4 even. Some pictures maybe? Here we go. Issue 4. Some would say that Bitcoin has a hoarding problem. In order for Bitcoin to truly become a currency, it must flow like the current. That's what the word means. Currency. That which flows. And Bitcoin is not flowing. Are large hoarders and companies designed to centralize Bitcoin, putting dams on our river of dreams? Theo Goodman, your thoughts. Is all we have to do to spend, or is it more complicated than that? There's the graphic. There we go.
It's more complicated than that. That's the short answer. Of course, spending is good, and hoarding is good too, because the less selling goes on, the less the price goes down. So, but yeah, I definitely think at this point it's good. I always encourage people to buy stuff. Buy stuff with your Bitcoin. That's always a good way to do it. If you were thinking, I want to sell my Bitcoin for cash, or just buy something. I mean, there's a lot of ways to buy it. Not to mention the plug in the middle of the show. That's also a good way to spend your Bitcoins. But there's plenty of ways to do it. You could also donate. There's plenty of ways to use Bitcoin. And if you want Bitcoin to grow, then spending Bitcoins, giving Bitcoins away, that's what's going to do it. Not giving a whole Bitcoin. I mean, little bits to people, but spending Bitcoin is definitely going to make it grow. Now, it might matter. You could say, okay, it depends on where you spend it. If you spend it at somewhere and they're just turning it directly into fiat and so on, yeah, that there's a point. But I think right now, just spending it definitely helps the whole ecosystem grow. And if we're ever going to have a Bitcoin economy where people stay in Bitcoin, then people are going to have to spend. And that's the only way it's going to happen. So hoarders, buy something.
And remember, just because you spend your Bitcoins doesn't mean that you can't buy it back. If you want to keep your holdings at a certain level, like 5 Bitcoins, and you want to spend a couple, you can just go ahead and buy them back, put them back in your holdings, or just buy Bitcoins for the sole purpose of spending them. Don't think about them as an investment and the value going up and down. Think about buying them, spending them, done. Will Pangman, your thoughts?
Yeah, so definitely think that hoarders have to buy Bitcoin in the first place in order to hoard it. So, hold on, there's some...
It sounds very
There's a very sad dog in the hallway. I'm sorry, everybody. But yeah, you have to buy Bitcoin first if you're going to hoard it, right? So, and also, spending Bitcoins is great, but we need to close the loop, and there's a bunch of different ways to do that. One way is to pay your vendors and pay your employees in Bitcoin. Or if you have short, like long-term contracts, to price them in part of them or some of them or whatever. On your books, have it tied to a contract.
I for one, am starting to question the value of this whole San Diego thing. It sounds like bad internet, loud dogs. I guess the weather's nice, right? At least the weather's nice. Well, we can't really hear you, Will, so we're going to move on. Exit question. What's the last thing you bought with Bitcoin? And what do you want to buy with Bitcoin that you haven't bought yet? Theo.
I'm going to avoid the question, and I'm going to say the last thing I did was I donated today with Bitcoin. There was a guy over at blab.im, and he fell ill, covert patron, and he's a really cool guy. And just a few weeks ago, we were talking about how he could use Bitcoin, and he already does homeless outreach in Cincinnati, and I was basically just explaining Bitcoin to him, and it was really funny. The first time I did a live stream on there, it was about Bitcoin. He came in the chat and he was really anti-Bitcoin. He said, "You guys are just talking about money all the time. What in the world are you guys doing?" And I was like, "Okay, I get it." And I ended up talking to him, and we got along really well. And now he's fell ill, and we've done a blabathon over there at blab.im. There's been a 24-hour blab. And people have donated Bitcoin, so that's the last thing I used Bitcoin for besides trading.
Very cool. Let's see if we can reach Will. Will, how's it going?
It's going all right. Last thing I bought was lunch, and then the thing I'd like to buy the most is a Tesla.
A Tesla. No starting at the bottom for you. I think the last thing I bought was Cliff Bars, which I'm going to eat for breakfast, and I bought more oatmeal that I'm also going to eat for breakfast. That's what I'm buying next. So yeah, I'm starting. When you start doing the purse thing, you start working down what categories of things can I buy, and I bought clothes, and now I'm buying food, and it's like pretty soon you just start buying everything in Bitcoin, and I think it's a lot of fun. So we're moving on to questions and answers. But there seems to be no questions, so we're going to give no answers. Theo Goodman, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week?
Yes, I am ready, as always, ladies and gentlemen, with story of the week. The story of the week for me is Ethereum launched. But I think that was last week. But guess what? The website bitmex.com has now offered future contracts for Ethereum, the first ever futures contracts. So you can go long and short on Ethereum, I believe up to 15 times leverage or maybe 10 times leverage. In any case, it's the first ever Ethereum futures contract over at BitMEX, and I think Author and BitMEX, they're doing a good job, and that's a really interesting product. So that's the story of the week.
Will Pangman, prediction or story of the week?
I think I'll go story of the week and tie a prediction to it. So story of the week, something I just learned, that Bitfinex appears to have pulled out of New York because of the Bit license, of course. This is one of the biggest companies in the space, probably the biggest exchange, and they're leaving New York. And my prediction is they won't be the last.
And they won't come back either. Moving on, prediction. All you need is love. Can't we just talk about this? Bitcoin companies continue to gather the ranks and circle the wagons as we enter into this intermediate period of Bitcoin history. But will it be enough? Can Bitcoin companies survive forever without profits? Can they survive without fees? Will all the king's horses and all the king's men ever put Humpty Dumpty back together again? Oh, we're out of time. Until next time, bye-bye.